All right. I guess we'll begin starting now. So thank you everyone for hopping on. Today's another webinar held by EVSE. It's more kind of relevant around what's being released in the market, which is some New South Wales EV Fleet Grant incentives. So this is obviously courtesy of the New South Wales government, who are being extremely proactive in the industry. And so hopefully today we'll run through everything around what it means, why they're doing it, what you need to look for, and then a bit at the end around just the EV charging and what you might need to consider from a charging perspective. Today, my name's Austin Devaney. I'm the National Sales Manager for EVSE, and I've been with the company for 3.5 years, and I'm joined with Krishna.
Hi, my name is Krishna. I'm a Business Development Manager for EVSE, taking care of New South Wales, ACT and South Australia. I come from a very long background in the automotive industry, so I can definitely help when it comes to EV fleets and cars.
Yeah, fantastic. So just some housekeeping stuff. If you have any questions, just put it into the chat. We will attend to it at the end. Secondly, this is being recorded. So we will send you a recording either tomorrow or the next day, so you can look back on this and be able to see what was said at different slides. And just to give you an idea of what you'll be seeing, so we went through the grant guidelines published by the New South Wales government and really looked at every single page and took out some of the core components of the grant. So hopefully today is just a nice readable format so you can digest it and understand clearly what's required at each section. All right, we'll get going.
Perfect. So just a little bit about who we are as well. So EVSE have been at the forefront of the EV charging industry since 2015. We see ourselves as one piece of the puzzle in decarbonising society and have the technology and experience to support the electrification of your fleet vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've been around for 10 years pretty much, and from there we've developed that turnkey offering. So we can help with everything from site consultations and understanding how you drive your vehicles, what power capacity is at your sites, to implementing and supplying the hardware and software, installing it, and then providing that ongoing support piece. So we've recently this year clicked over 10,000 installed chargers, which is a great feat from us, but that's a bit of an understanding around us, but we'll get more into the webinar, which you all care about.
Perfect. So just a quick run through of what we're going to go through today. First, we're going to start off with the aim of the charging grants and what's changed since round 3. Then we'll go on to the overview of both incentive options, one being the Kickstart funding and then the other one being the competitive bid funding. And then at the end, we'll just quickly run through how EVSE can best assist you.
Fantastic. All right, so what is the aim of the grant funding? So the New South Wales Fleet Incentive Program is what it's called. It's basically to allow fleets to start to transition to electric. It's super exciting because now, if you weren't looking at it before, now is a great place to start because it can allow you to electrify your fleet, lower your operating costs, reduce your emissions so you can hit your ESG targets, but also you can get it at a discounted price now. We'll go into what all that pricing means and what's involved, but it's a super exciting time, and I'm glad we've got about 60 people on this call because there's a lot of funding available to take advantage of. In terms of criteria, you can see just in those dot points there, just going to confirm. Okay, I was just being muted for some reason, but you can all hear me, I hope. So in terms of the criteria for EVs, it's up to vehicles that are 4.5 tonnes. They don't go over the luxury tax threshold or luxury car threshold, so that's around that $89,000 mark. So every car below that is eligible, and it's ordered. Yeah, so if you want to apply, the vehicle has to be ordered after the 24th of July 2024. In terms of EV charging, that charging infrastructure can be funded for chargers going in the home or at business, and the New South Wales government does allow funding for different types of funding models such as CAS or charging as a service, which we'll get into right at the end of this presentation. Fantastic.
Perfect. So we're just going to quickly run through both incentive options. We'll give a brief overview and then we'll go into a bit more detail on each of them. The first incentive option being the Kickstart funding. So the kickstart is pretty easy. It's just to get yourselves into the sort of EV market when it comes to having a fleet. If you have at least 3 vehicles in your fleet, you can use the kickstart funding to increase that fleet up to 10 vehicles. There's a handy table here which will tell you how much incentive you can get per vehicle and also per charging port with the incentive.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's obviously funding the passenger vehicles, it's funding light commercial vehicles, and then also those light trucks. We are, from a charging perspective, we're seeing a lot more heavy vehicles enter the market, especially that kind of the vans as well as the last mile delivery trucks are extremely popular. So if that's applicable to you, this might be a great area to take advantage of that. And then the charging funding also increases with those heavier vehicle side. Because typically you might be looking at more of a DC charging because the batteries are a bit bigger in those light trucks. Cool. So that's one funding option, which is Kickstart. The great thing is that's brand new. It's new for round 4 of this program because I think the New South Wales government, they saw that there was a need to provide a more streamlined option for fleets that are just starting to go electric. But what we've got, which is the more traditional bid funding option, and in the past 3 rounds has been kind of the only way to get funding, is through the competitive bid funding. This is a bit more complex, but we've put it into broken it down into some easy to understand slides. But some eligibility criteria is it needs to be for fleets of 21 vehicles or more, and the funding is available to support 11 or more battery electric vehicles. So they have to be fully electric. And it's dependent on the funding is dependent on how competitive your bid is. So if you look down in that table, there's 3 examples for different companies, for example, going for the bid funding. So the first rated company went for 35 vehicles, but they asked for a lower incentive requested per vehicle, which was around $6,000 off. So the way the government kind of rate this is they have their own emissions calculator, and they'll be able to understand, okay, we'll divide the general emissions by your total income requested, and then that way they can actually determine on the right-hand side who is getting the most value for money whilst eliminating or abating tons of CO2 emitted. And so that's the kind of way they run through it in a bit of a selective order. Generally, if there's 20 or 30 people applying for this, they will let you know, and we'll go into a bit of detail, but they'll let you know where you're ranked initially, and then you can go into be more of a competitive bid in the final area.
Yeah. A couple important notes as well is this only covers brand new EV vehicles, so nothing pre-owned or used. They have to be registered under a company name, so they can be used a little bit for personal use, but they have to be registered under a company name, and it doesn't take into account any vehicles that are converted from ICE, internal combustion engine, to EVs. It has to be brand new EVs from factory.
Yep. Exactly. All right, and just some additional information, like we might have just briefly run over it, but yeah, a price cap at 89,000. There's no price cap on the light commercial vehicles or the light trucks. So that's just for the price cap's just for the passenger vehicles. The vehicle ownership model, they're happy with outright purchases or leases, but novated leasing is excluded from this grant funding. And then on a charging perspective side, it's 1 EV charging incentive grant per electric vehicle you get. And that can be for the hardware or the installation costs. Typically, it will probably be for the hardware, so you can get a bit off that. But with that, they don't specify that you have to have software with those smart chargers. Although it's recommended because you need a way to track and monitor your fleet's charging, you don't need it to apply for the grant. Great.
Yep. So just a little bit more on the kickstarting fund we briefly touched on. So basically, who can apply? Private businesses, anything government, state council, and most importantly, car rental services, fleets, and ride shares. That's kind of who it's aimed at. And they've tried to make the process as easy as possible to avoid any sort of administration block. So all you need to do is sign up. Once you've signed up, you can submit an application. You'll receive a notification of approval. Then all you need to do is provide evidence of payment, which would be the registration certificate for the vehicles that you've applied for. And you'll receive the payment at the end of the calendar month of which you've actually applied and provided that evidence of payment.
Yeah, and this process is more streamlined. I think on the actual grant funding, this process has 5 steps, like you can see here, and for the competitive bid, it's about 11 steps. But they've done this Kickstarter program because they want to streamline the process and allow smaller fleets to just get started with some EVs. And the thing is, I think you can apply for multiple different fleets, like multiple different vehicles under the one grant. This grant expires once all the funds are exhausted. So it might span over 6 months or it might span over 12 months. It's just until the money or the incentive runs out. Okay, so at this stage, I would ask if you have any questions, but just put it in the chat and we can answer it at the end. But for the competitive bid funding, we'll get into that right now. All right. So on the left-hand side, for the competitive bid, there's 2 streams. One is for like the individual companies looking to transition their fleets to electric. And the other one is the aggregator streams. So this is like fleet management organizations that have a lot of customers. And so they're giving the incentives to both. In terms of bidding windows, I touched on this before, but there's obviously the initial bid, which is where you think, okay, well, I'm going to ask for an incentive of $10,000 off every vehicle, and I'm applying for 100 vehicles. Well, they will take that government and they will rank you according to how everyone else has ranked, and then they'll provide feedback on where you've come. So if we came 25th place, then it gives you another option to do a final bid to make your offering more competitive. And this kind of gives you a bit of an understanding of where you sit with everybody else and whether you're happy with that price or you can go a bit lower in terms of how much incentive you want off. And then in terms of the bidding rules, so there's emission abatement calculators, and they do this by comparing the estimated tailpipe greenhouse gas emissions with the emissions from using electricity to charge the BEVs. And like one other point is the fleet managers can apply in both streams for different vehicles as well. So there's a bit of flexibility with this grant, which is great, but there also needs to be a bit of proof from your fleet manager's side to show how you're going to integrate these vehicles into your fleet. What we've typically seen a lot of organizations do is they hold a bit like some drive days to kind of get everyone comfortable with the hardware, the charging hardware, the charging software, also the vehicles themselves, as this kind of eliminates a lot of questions or a lot of concerns. And then there's also the delivery of internal training programs, for example. These are just 2 examples we've put here, but there might be other aspects that you can help kind of integrate it into your business. Fantastic. So I have helped combine the 11 steps on the grant guidelines into generally 5 steps, which are the core steps you need to kind of follow. The first being obviously sign up to the online portal, and number 2 is prepare an application. So what that means is you're including your ABN, you're including your fleet size and structure, the estimated average annual distance traveled as well. What they also want to know is the details on EVs, the number of EVs per category, like if that's passenger vehicle, light commercial vehicle, or light truck. They also want to know the percentage of EVs that are leased or owned that you're looking for, and they'll need the rego numbers of the vehicles being replaced. So that's pretty important for the individual fleet aspects, as it allows them to kind of get a good understanding of what you're transitioning and gives them that data that they need. Also, as part of the number 2, you need to kind of figure out the TCO gap for each BEV. So that allows kind of you to get a gauge on, okay, well, how much are you wanting to cover from that gap? You can't you can't ask to cover the entire TCO gap. The New South Wales government won't allow that, but you can cover a large percentage of it or a small percentage of it, depending on how competitive you want to be. From that, on the prepare an application aspect, from an aggregator side, the aggregator can make a bid for a guaranteed number of EVs, and then they can just put in their estimated emissions abatement that they believe they'll provide. And then on more of a kind of material aspect, they need to provide the models and total number of the battery electric vehicles as well, and some other details that you can find in the grant guides. So there's a bit of information that they need in that number 2 step, but once you progress through that, you can see in 3.1 and 3.2 is that initial and final bid offering, where you can kind of take it back and understand where you want to basically sit in the ladder. And then once you've been approved it, you need to provide evidence for payment, and then you receive that payment. There's a lot of talking there, but that's basically the core steps you need to consider. I'd say number 2 just has some details that you need to investigate on your own.
Yeah. And please, again, feel free to put questions in the chat if required, and we'll make sure we answer all of them for you, because there is a lot to go through. If you have questions, we'll make sure we answer all of them.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Okay, so this is just a bit of a guideline on how long it takes in terms of each step in the process. So the registration/initial bidding window takes about a 5-week program. And the initial ranking, once the New South Wales government get that, it will take them a week to rank all of the companies and all of the fleets that are looking to go electric. And you'll have 2 weeks after that to really reevaluate your submission and apply. It then takes the following 2 months for the assessment and the requests for clarification to come through, and then they'll notify you of the result. So that's pretty standard, and it's pretty simple to understand. I think what I wanted to highlight was just the below points around the incentive ceiling on previous rounds. So obviously you're going to come into this and you're going to have a vehicle that might cost $50,000, and you need to understand what incentive you can kind of put towards the application that's going to be reasonable, because you obviously can't ask for the whole amount. And so this round 1, round 2, and round 3, they've given us data on what the maximum or the ceiling on incentive prices that were provided in each round. So round 1 was 12,500, and that was the highest of all 3. The second round, it got more competitive. It was about a 12% drop to about $11,000 was the highest amount one company charged for to get incentives per vehicle. And then the third round was again about an 11% drop to $9,899. So it makes you think that it will probably be around an 11% drop from that third round price. So it's really good to consider. Keep in mind when you're applying, because this will allow you to keep or remain competitive in that bidding process. All right, so look, that's a bit of a deep dive. It's a well summarized guide to the grant guidelines. We can provide a link to the grant guidelines after this, but right now I think we wanted to run through the what happens after in terms of the charging aspect, which we're kind of more experts in deploying. If you have any questions with these grants, please put them in the chat, because there's obviously a lot more intricate details, but this did summarize quite a lot of it.
Yeah. So we're just going to run through the partnership approach now and how EVSE can best assist. There's a bit of a structure to this as well. It's very easy to just supply and install hardware, but the most important thing is consultation and understanding up front how you use your vehicles, how your daily operations are, and the site needs as well and requirements. That's the most important part, because you need to make sure you're getting the right solution for your vehicles. If you have for example, vehicles are being parked overnight and not moved anywhere, you can have a slower charger. If you need vehicles that are coming back to base throughout the day, need to charge rapidly, you'd be going for faster chargers. We go through a full site consultation, initial feasibility and everything to make sure that we can provide the right solution for you. Then we can go into hardware installation, software, and then afterwards as well, another really important part is the ongoing support. That's critical in making sure that the chargers maintain their uptime, because you need to make sure that your cars can be charged and are ready to use at any time they need to be used.
Yeah, and the practical thing is, if you get an electric vehicle, you'll most likely need charging infrastructure. You need a way to charge it. You need a way to track that data. And what we've found is it's quite simple, at least to begin the installation side of installing chargers, but it's a lot more difficult to keep up and support and maintain charging infrastructure, which we're experts at and which we've kind of streamlined over the last 10 years. But With that support and maintenance, it's also training and change management with your organization. So it's understanding what you guys need. If it's, you're holding fleet days, for example, fleet drive days with EVs, and you need a charging expert to be there to answer questions your employees might have. Or if it's essentially around how do you tap onto a charger and start charging, how is that monitored on the back end, and all that internal training required, because it is a bit of a switch, right? It's you don't fill up at the petrol stations anymore. You charge where you park, which is either going to be your home or it's going to be at your depot 90% of the time. So that's a bit of how we can assist with that charging perspective.
With the charging hardware, so based off that initial feasibility and that consultation that we do, we can help find the right solution and the right hardware for you. Portable charging is really good for sites that just want to kind of get a charger in and be able to charge their cars without having to invest in infrastructure and a lot of upgrades to their site or anything like that. It's a quick plug and play option. All you need is a 5-pin power outlet, and you can use that, and you can move around from car to car as well. So you're not limited to a specific area of your site as well.
And that's super important, especially if you're just looking at getting one charger to test. What we've found is the main prohibitor for getting an electric vehicle tends to be a bit around that that infrastructure piece at your sites, and potentially the cost of installation. So if you want to get an EV, you don't, and you're worried about costs for installing it and assessing the sites, there's portable options for you. What we have on the screen here is a portable DC unit. There's also portable AC charging units that you can do to get a charge around 40 kilometers of range per hour. That are there, and they're also an option.
Yeah, perfect. The AC charging, so when you get into AC and DC charging, this is for if you're going to be expanding your fleet, especially if you're going for that second grant, which is for big entries and multiple cars, you want to have a structured area or like charging infrastructure on your site. AC chargers can come in wall and floor mounted options as well. So again, based off how we have our initial consultation, there might be a better solution for having it on the wall or having it floor mounted. Floor mounted options also come in dual port as well. So you don't have to have one per bay. You could even put it in between two bays if required. And then spread them out so that you can charge multiple cars at the same time.
That's correct. And the grant funding is giving you $1,200 off the cost of a charger per vehicle. So for example, the wall boxes on the left-hand side here, they typically fall around that $2,000 to $2,500 mark. So you might even be getting about half of the cost off per EV charging hardware. You get. So that's a bit of an idea around, maybe 50% of the actual hardware for the chargers is discounted. And then lastly is DC fast charging. So this is for most likely either for trucks, buses, or vehicles that have a short dwell time at your sites. They do cost a bit more, but they provide that convenience of an ultra rapid charge. And so this is kind of the range that you typically look at and determine, okay, which ones work with your fleet's requirements, which ones can we fit into our sites.
Yeah. So if your cars are just going to be coming back to base for say half an hour, and they need a quick charge, then you'd go DC. Yeah. If they're going to be parked there throughout the day, they can go with AC.
Absolutely. There we go. All right. So that was about a hardware. To give you an idea around, like for fleet managers especially, it's extremely important to understand how your vehicles drive, how they charge, when they come and charge, who's charging, and even understanding if something goes wrong, how are you notified? So that's where smart software platforms come into place, where you can put this on the charging stations themselves, in fleets, in homes, in public as well. You can track it all under one roof, and then allows you to get an understanding of each individual charging session. So you can see who charged, at what time did they come in and plug in, how much electricity did they pull or consume, and if it did cost them, say for the home, how much did it cost them? And you can get all of that reporting. You can do your own modeling. You can export it to your own internal systems, and do with what you like. But I think for fleet managers, especially the on-demand support and the identification if something does go wrong or a fault occurs on the charger, the software picks that up. So the software will notify both the fleet manager, and the software notifies the software team, which in this case would be Explorin, to be able to go, okay, well, something's wrong. Let's quickly fix that, because we understand your fleets are sensitive in terms of operations, and we need to make sure their uptime is maxed. And then lastly, the last point there is energy management. What we find is a lot of buildings in the past were developed, but not with EV charging in mind. So once you start entering past the 5 charging station mark, you'll most likely, for AC charging, you'll most likely encounter some power issues. This is where load control or load management can come into play, and is extremely important in protecting your building from tripping, but also being able to scale your charging stations out. Load control can help add 4 times as many chargers than if you didn't have it. And that can allow you to electrify your fleet with confidence and can give you the understanding around your site's capacities. And if something happens, you know that the chargers will downrate when there's not enough power. And fantastic. All right. Look, it's been about 30 minutes, so hopefully it didn't take up too much of your time. But now we're just going to run through 2 case studies that I'd like to talk to. We've gone through the grant and we've gone through kind of the hardware and software, but this Liverpool Hospital case study is one that we recently did earlier this year. And as part of the New South Wales state government's rollout of electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. What their need was they had vehicles that had a medium dwell time at site, but they were also concerned that if a vehicle wasn't charged and it needed to leave, how would they go about that? So what we came in and provided was a full scope and engineering analysis on confirming your site's capacity, and then confirming the installation scope of works and how we were going to go about that. We implemented 7 dual port towers, which covered 14 bays for that slow AC charging. And then we had a DC charging station, which you can see in that bottom picture there, which is a rapid charger. So that's 60 kilowatts. It's mounted on a stand, but it can also mount on a wall for convenience if some of your sites, you didn't want to lose any parking bay space or so on. And that can charge a vehicle up in under 60 minutes, fully from 0 to 100. What was also important to them was they had software to help track and monitor all of their charging information. And then they had servicing and maintenance agreements in place, so that if something goes wrong, or if they just need to be checked once a year, we have electrical teams going outside to test and tag the chargers and to confirm from a physical and an electrical perspective that everything's safe. And yeah, they're slowly expanding, and this was one of the largest New South Wales health sites. What I also want to talk about a bit here is just the Eurocold. So we recently provided portable DC charging for Eurocold. That's with their electric trucks, because their trucks travel to and from a lot of depots, but they didn't want to install any infrastructure. So that's where in this bottom right-hand side, there's a DC charging station that really allows them to be able to kind of maneuver it with the van and plug in where they need to. So there's different case studies and use cases, and that's why there's different hardware ranges on the market. But that is essentially the webinar, just talking about the grants and what we do. But now we'll just go into the questions, because we obviously wouldn't have answered absolutely everything. And this is hopefully where you can ask your own information. Just on that, there is a charging as a service slide, which we have here. And basically what charging as a service is it's essentially, like, think of it as a bit of financing, but it's where you package the hardware, the software, the installation, the maintenance and the warranties all into one ongoing monthly cost. So if you're worried that there's the CapEx or the upfront cost is too high, you can expand that over a 3 or 4 or 5 year monthly cost for your fleet depot or for your fleet home, and then essentially de-risks you. So, if in 5 years there's new technology that's available, you can simply swap it out for a more technology advanced charging station. But this is becoming very common and very it's having high uptake in Europe, especially the UK and some of those Scandinavian countries. And so we're seeing it start to trickle down into the Australian market. Obviously not a huge demand right now, but it is certainly an option that you need to consider. Fantastic. I will just flick over to the chat box, as we've had some questions in there. Look, I hope that was informative, and you will get a recording, but we'll just dive straight into the questions here. Also, put any questions you have into this into the chat as well.
Yep. So Suresh has asked, what are the elements driving the drop in the incentive ceiling? So that's based off the 12 and 11% drop we saw. The main sort of driver would be competition, because it is very much first in best dressed with these grants.
Yep.
Yep. So the more people that get into it, the more expensive the EV networks go, the more people who are interested in doing it, the more competition there is, which will drive that drop.
That's correct. Well, you can see stage one, and I think round one might have started about 2 years ago. And at that stage, not many fleets were electrifying. But as the fleets, as time goes on, more and more, there's more and more uptake in both kind of the normal user aspect in the industry, but also a lot of fleets and businesses are starting to go electric. And so there's more competition into the bidding, and that's what's driving it lower. So, round 4 will most likely be slightly lower than what round 3 was. Yep.
Next one, collaboration.
Can you talk a bit about the Kickstart program? Do you know the criteria that will be used to evaluate this part of the program, and what caps might be in place? So Michelle, yes. So for the Kickstart program, they tried to keep it pretty simple. There's obviously the eligibility list. Eligible orgs can apply for like multiple times for the grant. So it's, if you've got 3 vehicles you want now, you can apply later for several more. And at the start of every month, they actually identify and allow everyone to understand how much funding is left. In terms of what caps might be in place, it's similar, right? In terms of a TCO cap, I think $3,000 is, if the incentive you're looking for is to cover $3,000 and that's the total TCO cap for your vehicle, they'll cover the full thing. Whereas if it's higher than that, the New South Wales government will start to only cover a small amount. In terms of other caps, it's pretty much what we talked about, just the light vehicle price cap on the passenger vehicles. But for the others, there's no price cap on like light trucks and light commercial vehicles. The Explorer software is not included in all charger purchases. So Explorer is simply an additional software piece. It's an ongoing subscription per year. It costs it might be about $12 per month or just something around that range, but it doesn't cost a tremendous amount. And it essentially adds a lot of value in terms of giving you information and data. Also, how different is it from the charger software provided by manufacturers? If you can just give me more clarification over what charger software is provided by manufacturers. To my understanding, the market's pretty split in terms of there's hardware for charging and then there's software. There are different companies that put their software onto charging stations. So if you've just more information around that, I can elaborate a bit. Yep. Do you have an idea of the total fund available under this grant? It's several million in the past. You can actually look at it online to see the last 3 rounds and how much funding each individual business received. I'll have to check on exactly how much, but they're quite transparent in terms of how much is being funded, as well as how much funding has been given to previous applicants. And all New South Wales councils are eligible. So all New South Wales councils are eligible, all fleets are eligible. It's pretty much just a race to consume the incentive before it runs out. There's no typical deadline on this from what I can read, but it's really until all the funds are exhausted. Yeah.
I think that's it.
Okay, is there any other questions? I just know a bit of changes from round 3 was that obviously the Kickstart funding is now available. But in terms of eligibility criteria for the competitive bid funding, there's now like a difference is that there's a minimum fleet size of 21 vehicles is needed for that, because they've obviously introduced this Kickstart, and that they are only looking for funding for 11 or more vehicles. On top of that, they removed any upfront evidence request for things like mileage evidence. So it makes the process a bit easier for fleets trying to kind of just get it accepted. I think there was a lot of admin previously. And they removed the need to have the vehicles charged by renewable energy. So that used to be a criteria where they have to be solar charged, but or you pay PPAs, but no more. Is there any increased incentive with vehicles over 4.5 tonne to assist with the price gap? From what I know, so this grant doesn't fund that. There's a lot of funding out right now. Some of it's curbside. So this is fleet. There's fast charging DC grant funding, but in terms of over that 4.5 tonne mark, nothing yet. I think as we start to see more and more trucks come into the market, it will become more of a prominent feature with the government. Is the Explorer included with all chart? Yep, yeah, we answered that. Are there any benchmarks for competitive bids, such as if you're in the top? Yes. Yeah, so it's Syed, that's exactly right. When you submit your initial bid, the government will rank you and then let you know where you rank against everybody else. And then from there, you can then submit a final bid to potentially incentive you're asking for. Yeah, so Stephanie, any insights into or limitations on how the funding can work together with commercial financing? Look, that's probably a question that we can answer offline. In terms of funding with commercial financing, there's charging as a service, which the New South Wales government are starting to implement. That's essentially, it's kind of like leasing where you package it all in and you only pay an ongoing monthly cost. But I'd be happy to kind of help run through that question in a bit more detail after this is over. What I might do as well is just put my details into the chat as well as Krishna's. So my email is there. Krishna will put his in, and you can just send us some information directly if you have anything you want to. Syed, for example, some of the chargers such as Wallbox come with their own charge. I see. Yep. That is mainly designed for chargers on the same network. Yep. At InchTeam, we have a web manager, which is similar. Okay, yeah, that's correct. So is the Explorer included? Okay, yep, now I understand. So that's good to know. It's not typically vastly different. It obviously depends on the details. Obviously, all software platforms typically show the reporting, the charging sessions and information. They can typically allocate RFID cards and then do load control to a certain degree. I think with the Explorer platform, we've found a lot of success with that due to the reliability and the support aspect of them being based locally in Australia. And so that really helps in being able to fix problems ASAP and be able to do demonstrations and really clarify any questions or concerns. Plus, the platform we've found has a lot of features and a lot of detail that helps fleets, especially in terms of multi-tiered management settings and things like that. All right. Where's the Q&A? I think that's it. Flicking between. All right, perfect. Look, it's been, yep, Michelle. Sweet. Love the questions. Keep them coming. Similar question, is the incentive only for vehicle purchase or can it be used to offset costs of a lease, a 2-year lease via Origin 360 or similar? So they do say that it is both applicable to leasing and applicable to the full cost, like if you were to buy the vehicle outright. So those are both eligible. The one thing that isn't eligible is novated leasing. So what I might show here, this screen just on the bottom left, vehicle ownership model, it allows for an outright purchase or lease, but it doesn't allow for novated leasing. That might just be a further question to the government around how that arrangement occurs because they haven't given too much detail on that. And Nishan, do you have standard pay cards for your chargers? Is there a payment system solution for different chargers on the market for leaseback EV vehicles? So payment cards, payment system solution for different chargers. Okay, so you might be mentioning if there's different chargers on different platforms potentially, or if you just have different chargers located around the place. So typically what we find fleets and what we help fleets do is allocate them RFID cards. So RFID cards will be associated to, like fuel cards. Yep. Yeah, so like a fuel card, it will be an RFID tag that's associated to the vehicle's registration plate. We can set that using the help of Explorer on the back end. And so that allows you for a driver to tap on at the depot and they understand, okay, well, this registration plate is charging here, and then it tracks where else they charge, which might be they take the vehicle home and charge, or they tap on in public to an exploring charger and start charging. So it's exactly like replicating the fuel card experience, yes. And then all of that data is captured, and for whatever they charge at home, that fleet company or the business is able to reimburse them with the electricity costs that they occurred from charging. Yes, and I can share this presentation afterwards. It'll also be in a recording too, if that helps. If you want to listen to our voices again. But
Austin has a beautiful voice.
If there's no other questions, I'm sure there's going to be more. But look, our emails are there. Please get in contact with us if you'd like. I'll send this to you in the next day or two about the recording and the Prezzo slides. But yeah, we're here to help. It's obviously a really fantastic grant that's available. And no other state or territory has this eligible. So we're pretty special in New South Wales. So yeah, if you need a question or you have some concerns or queries, yeah, let us know. Great. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining, and we'll catch you in the next webinar, which will most likely be around a fleet charging, around a public curbside and public fast charging grants, which might come out in the next month or so.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for attending. We look forward to seeing some emails come through with some more questions as well.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.